Is it only ice cream? How far do you stray? Is it like gelato? Would it be chocolate factories, or is it just ice cream?
Oh, like I tell all my portfolio companies, you got to focus, you know?
Yeah.
I have ventured into gelato too.
Okay.
This is not your typical venture podcast. We assume the listener or the viewer can Google simple things like stage, industry focus, average check size, etc. Guests and interviewers do consume alcoholic drinks during the taping of our show. So we do so responsibly, and we ask that everyone do so as well. So let's begin.
Hello and welcome to Drinks with a VC. As always, thanks a lot for joining us. I'm Vic Laquara, the founder and general partner of GreenCow Venture Capital, and I am joined, as always, by my hostess with the mostest, Bree Hansen from Burkland, a wonderful company that provides CFO services for startups. Definitely check them out if you are in need. Tonight, we're pretty spicy, so I'm excited to get going.
Exactly. When I was doing research on our next guest, I was floored by how many places she has traveled. Wow, incredible. I can't wait to find out more. So Vic, take it away.
I'm really excited to dig in. If you were to look at her dual degrees in economics and philosophy from Columbia, where she graduated summa cum laude and Phi Beta Kappa, her MBA from Harvard, her time at McKinsey, where she led the firm's first project with Facebook, which was the launch of internet.org. If you look at her work at Matrix Partners as a PM at Masterclass, those things only provide a portion of really what makes Anoushka. I just said it for the first time ever. I said the guest name before we introed them, but it would really only give you a glimpse of why she's such a dedicated, sought-after investor and a partner now at Lightspeed Venture Partners. So I'm really excited to dig in and hear her origin story. So without further ado, please welcome the pride of Horace Mann, Anoushka Vaswani. Cheers, Anoushka.
Cheers.
Really excited to be on the show with you guys.
We are so happy to have you. What are you drinking? What did you choose for today's episode?
I'm drinking a glass of Sancerre.
Very nice. Very nice.
Love Sancerre. So what made you decide that was going to be your drink tonight?
So it was actually a former coworker's favorite drink, and he would just religiously order it every time we went out. And I wanted to know what all the hype was about. And he'd always also correct everyone on the pronunciation, and always pronounce it with this deep French accent. And so after that, he's gotten me hooked as well. And so now whenever I see an opportunity to order it, I always order Sancerre.
Nice. Do you like oysters?
That's a great combo.
Mm-hmm.
Hard to go wrong.
Do you feel like you've become a wine aficionado because of that? Are you kind of just like, no, just give me a Sancerre and that's it?
Always really enjoyed wine.
Yeah.
And then particularly when I moved out to the West Coast, I guess it was like now 10 years back, it's hard not to appreciate wine because it's just so easy to go to, I don't know, Napa, Sonoma. You always go when a friend's in town. And so I would say definitely these 10 years in California have only really deepened the appreciation for wine.
Love it.
Nice.
Love it. Well,
nice.
Let's go back to your time well before California. And I think I mentioned this, right? But you've lived all over. I think Bree and I are really wondering, right, what it's like to grow up in a city like Istanbul.
Istanbul was probably one of my family's favorite postings. And so, for context, both my parents are from India. I was born in Dubai. We got relocated to Istanbul, and then I kind of really grew up there. And it's got, if you want history, culture, Turkish food is amazing. And then, it's also really nice in the summers if you go to the south of Turkey. I would recommend that for any summer vacation. But it's just such a, I know, beautiful country to live in. And so across the board for the whole family, I think that was just like a wonderful 6 years.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. So what did your parents do for work?
My dad was on the international staff of a bank, and so the policy was that you needed to move every 4 to 6 years. And so we did Dubai, Turkey, Brussels, then we moved to New York. And while we were in New York, he was actually relocated to Singapore, and so the whole family did back and forth between New York, Singapore. And I luckily got to switch from the Indian passport to the Singaporean passport, which was a nice upgrade from needing visas to travel anywhere to needing visas to travel nowhere. And then they were relocated to England, and I stayed in the States, but it's definitely been a lot of moves back and forth.
Yeah.
Wow.
What was it like growing up and traveling, and then you're the only child? Like, I gotta imagine there's so many sweet perks because it's all about you. And now you're traveling to all of these exotic, beautiful places, and it's all about you. Like, what was your, like, the number one perk as like an only child in Singapore and Istanbul or wherever?
I think you just get exposed to a lot of different, cultures and people. And I would always go to the international school. And so typically a lot of the school's policy was, one of your parents needed to be a foreigner or not from that country.
Yeah.
And so the diversity in a given class also used to be quite high. And so just from like a learning process, I think that was phenomenal. And then I don't know, Vic, if you are similar, but I grew up with, your stereotypical Indian parents. So lots of focus and dedication at, all times, whether you like it or not.
Yeah. Do they consider you a failure or a success?
There's
Like
always room for improvement.
Okay. That's
I'm
such
not
a good
CEO
answer.
yet, so
That is such a good answer. That is I always like to say that my parents, first of all, they're interesting in the sense that they're very forward thinking and progressive. But at the same time, they hold on to older stereotypes of what it means to potentially be successful and have a full life, right? And I don't know if your parents are like that, but did they fluctuate when you were going from, from, and forgive me, but going from McKinsey and, graduating from Harvard, getting your MBA, and then going from McKinsey to then, oh, you're a PM at Masterclass? What is that? Did they fluctuate a lot with you?
I think it's also been an interesting learning process for them because I think, a good immigrant Indian family loves stability, loves if you're working at a, company they recognize and know about. And so, maybe, I think it's been interesting for them to also observe some of the changes I've made because I started my career actually at Goldman, which is something that, I think the parents definitely knew. And then you're telling them, okay, I'm actually moving to the West Coast. I'm joining. My parents actually had no idea what VC or Matrix was, so that was another surprise. You're joining a startup. Like, what are you doing? But it's been fun. Like, I think they've slowly, also been exposed to like the Valley, this tech ecosystem, the startup ecosystem. And it's something as a family, I think we all really love to discuss. And so that's been quite fun.
Yeah. Did the discussions around tech and innovation happen well before you moved out to Silicon Valley? I guess Bree and I spend a lot of time with our guests kind of finding out their motivation for why they love being in tech and who their earliest motivators were. What was your situation like?
My dad, I know, is an incredibly forward-thinking individual. And I think every year which is kind of a practice I've taken on, he'll commit to, 2 new topics that he wants to learn about and become an expert in. And we'll go really, really deep. But it was funny. I mean, probably even back when we were in Turkey, and this was like the 1990s, he was talking about the power of technology, the importance of it in his business.
Hmm.
And I think, he actually was always really fascinated by the West Coast and just the whole ethos here. And so I think part of that, honestly, was, part of the inspiration to move out here, to build a career in technology. So I definitely, owe a lot of credit to him for, I know, even inspiring the thinking.
Yeah. Kind of take us back to Istanbul even too. What are your fond memories of your time in Istanbul? And also just sort of as your dad's kind of moving from place to place and he's taking you to these different locales, like what do you think you take from that to and bring to your current job at Lightspeed?
Yeah, I mean, Istanbul, I think, was a very idyllic experience,
Okay.
in some ways for me, where, um, we lived on the Asian. Istanbul is actually separated between Europe and Asia, and the Bosphorus separates it. So we lived on the Asian side. We lived in this kind of neighborhood. I would ride my bike around. We had a golden retriever named Snoopy. One day I hope
Oh,
to get another golden retriever again, but it honestly was a very, I guess, like joyful, relaxed upbringing. Um, but I think one interesting thing, with my dad, I would say from a very young age, he always treated me like an adult, and we would have, debates. But one thing that was very inspiring is he kind of put his heart and soul into work, and that drove the moves as well. But his level of passion for, you know, talking about his work, talking about his team, talking about building teams, I think was very, very inspiring. And so I always also felt like it's super important to be doing something you like truly love and want to spend, 100 hours of a week putting your heart and soul into. And then, it's funny that I'm on the investing side. He was always on the operating side, and seeing kind of, what it takes to like motivate a team. What does that look like? Navigating big company politics is also, I think, like a lesson in and of itself.
Yeah,
Um, I think those were just really interesting things to observe from afar.
yeah, yeah. We wanted to bring back a little bit of Istanbul to you. And so I think Bree, is it bag
It
A?
it would be bag A,
Bag
yes.
A. So next to Anoushka, she has 3 bags for our VC unboxing. And the first bag A she'll be opening up right now. And let's get her reaction.
Oh wow, it's Turkish delights. This is deadly.
Oh
It's
yeah.
deadly. It's deadly. Uh, as always, Bree and the team at Burkland do an amazing job of researching our guests well in advance, and so we hope the Turkish delights play their part and give you a cheery holiday.
Thank
So,
you. So
yeah.
thoughtful.
Uh, well, let's go on. You have a very impressive educational background, but and I think a lot of people, as I mentioned in the intro, would say just assume kind of the path that you took to venture was very cookie cutter. But when they realize that it started uh, well before that, as you're getting exposure to technology through your dad, I think it changes things a lot. You've had embarrassing moments in middle school where you were caught in a bowl of pasta. Tell us about that, where it was, and how you go from that to then, these Horace Mann even, and then Columbia and Harvard.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I didn't expect that to come up, but my best friend, and he continues to be one of my best friends to this day, went through a period where I would say it was a violent vegetarianism period, and so she caught me eating meat pasta one day, and then proceeded, as I was standing up to do something, proceeded to put it on my chair, and I sat down in a bowl of meat pasta in front of the entire
Wow.
cafeteria. But but I would say middle school for me, like maybe a lot of us, was a pretty rough period where I managed to make it on the other side. But it was definitely a culture shock. I'd moved from Turkey, was a very awkward middle schooler, and went to maybe like very stereotypical type A New York prep school. And
Yeah.
so that definitely took some adjusting.
Let's start with your expertise in SaaS. Everyone knows you seem like one of the top SaaS experts. How did you land that title?
I guess now I've been looking at SaaS companies for the past 6 years and doing SaaS investing. And so I started at Matrix doing seed and Series A investing, predominantly in B2B companies. I joined Lightspeed as we were building out our growth practice. And so I spend a lot of time now looking at later stage SaaS companies. But I think the thing I like about enterprise companies is you can kind of follow a bit more of a playbook and iterate on customer feedback, where we have a whole separate team internally dedicated to consumer. And I feel like I'm just not cool enough to be a consumer investor. Or, some of the trends and themes they follow are so interesting. And a lot of companies, I mean, the market cap of consumer companies, if it works,
Yeah.
oftentimes are much larger than enterprise businesses. But it really sometimes feels like catching lightning in a bottle with some of those businesses.
Yeah. What I knew we were gonna get to the nerdy geeky stuff at some point in time. What Bree and I have been wondering, what is your favorite SaaS metric? And we have bets on this, but go ahead.
I'm very curious to hear your bets, actually. I think my favorite SaaS metric is probably net dollar retention.
Damn.
Oh,
I didn't I
that
don't
was
blame you.
not on my list.
That
How
was
would
not.
you? Okay, so for our listeners that don't know what it is, how would you describe it and why is it important?
Yeah.
I would describe it as it's a measure of how companies retain on your product and continue paying you. And it also includes if they expand or upsell. Um, and so, if you, I know, start with $100 annual contract and you look next year, does the customer return? Do they pay 150? And that's kind of how I would think about the metric. And the reason I think it's so powerful is I think one of the biggest signals around product market fit is, do people start using your product, absolutely love the product, keep using it, and then increase usage over time? And, that this metric reflects. And then, for companies that have really nice net dollar retention, let's say you have 150% net dollar retention, the crazy thing about the metric is, let's say, the following year, you don't even add a single new customer, your company is going to grow by 50% regardless. And so it's such a powerful element to have baked into your business model, if you have that baked in.
I think that's a strong advocacy for net dollar retention. I like it.
It seems like you decided very early on that business enterprise SaaS was sort of like your lane, that you really wanted to be in that lane. What was the aha moment that got you to that point?
Matrix actually is a fund where you can be a little bit more generalist. And I actually looked at a bunch of different companies there. I worked with a bunch of fintech companies. I actually invested in a consumer company, or two consumer companies actually, and then also worked with a bunch of B2B companies. And one thing I actually really love about Lightspeed is they do encourage specialization early on. And I do think that is very helpful when you're working with entrepreneurs, because I don't know, the types of people you're hiring, the competencies you need to build, the team DNA looks, I would say, pretty different if you're building a consumer company versus an enterprise company. And so I think one learning I've had in venture is like the more I can deepen my network in an area, the more helpful I can be to my founders, the more thoughtful I can be when looking at, a new business. It isn't like I'm like learning an entire space from the ground up. It's, hey, I've actually met 100 companies in the sector. I have a viewpoint on various ones. I can introduce you to a bunch of partners or potential hires. And so I think your ability to be, thoughtful and someone interesting that an entrepreneur would want to have as part of, their cap table, definitely increases with specialization.
Got it. We want to get into a game, and we always like to play games on this show, but we have a fun game for you today. Are you game?
Yeah, let's do it.
So this one is called Sweet and Sassy Trends of 2023. And we are going to read you a tweet, a recent tweet of yours, and then ask you a burning question about 2023.
All right. I'm nervous about what tweet you'll pick,
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
No, it's okay. Bree, do you want to take the first one?
The tweet is, if you are an enterprise team seeing softness in Q3, Q4, know that almost every company is experiencing this dynamic right now. It's a tricky time across the board. More important than ever to stay focused and stay motivated. So given that's your tweet, our question is, should SaaS startups focus on growth or profit during a recession?
The pendulum always swings, right, between how much the market values growth and profitability. Now, it isn't that it's not valuing growth at all. It's just valuing profitability more than it has. So previously, I would say the market was not valuing profitability at all. And so that shifted. But I do think in this environment, like a point of growth is still more valuable than a point of profitability net. And so if you are a company that's looking towards an IPO, like I still think you need to grow, like, it depends, it varies based on your stage, but you're trying to grow like at least, 2x if you're below 50 million in ARR, let's say. But then I do think that in this environment, like we've been able to see some incredible businesses that sometimes grow 3, 4, 5x. And I think if you are going through 23 planning, which a lot of our portfolio is going through, recognizing, okay, what's the burn multiple on my growth and making sure to manage that such that, you're not growing at all costs is super, super important. And so I do think kind of the financing environment over the next 12 months is going to be trickier. And so just making sure you ultimately need to survive and make sure you have enough runway. And I think a lot of our companies are adjusting plan just to make sure, you're burning less than, let's say, like your burn multiple is under 2x.
We're gonna get to those metrics in a minute. Let's go to the next tweet. Pumped to announce our investment in Enable, which is rapidly becoming the de facto system of record for B2B trade agreements. So with that, and congratulations, by the way, what is one old school industry or vertical that is reliant on legacy processes or tech that is prime for a SaaS revolution for the 21st century in 2023?
One space that I think has been really dominated by legacy tech, which I'm really excited about seeing evolution around, is the contact center. And so that's actually still 85% on-prem software, and pretty like very old school systems. And so we are seeing actually many startups attacking that space from different angles with kind of cloud-based software models. And so that is one area that I'm personally really, really excited about, where I have actually met a number of entrepreneurs going after that space.
I think that's actually really, really insightful. But I think that's a really special hot take that, mark my words, Bree, that's going to come back and be correct in 2023.
All right, next one. There are only 22 public software companies with a 10 billion plus market cap right now, but 213 software private unicorns. That got, I think, over 2,000 retweets. So that was a big tweet of yours. Our question is, how will SaaS valuations and multiples move in 2023?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a major shift in the public markets. And so honestly, when we were looking at growth stage companies, and we always have this one slide on where public companies are trading, particularly when you're investing, in a company above $1 billion valuation.
Yeah.
And, at one point last year, you had like top SaaS multiples at 50 times, 40 times forward. And now, I think the top SaaS multiple is trading at 12 to 13 times. And so that's just a crazy shift in valuation. And we've seen a pretty dramatic reset on the public side that we haven't seen yet on the private side. And so, I think this is something that we do think about a lot with new companies, with portfolio companies, and how do you think about growing into these valuations that you might have raised in 2020, 2021?
Yeah. And let's go into like the earlier stage company dynamic. And this tweet that you have, Lightspeed is announcing that we're leading a $4.2 million seed round into Circle ABSXYZ platform that enables anyone to create their own virtual characters powered by AI. So I know this isn't your tweet. You were CC'd on this tweet. I guess I'm curious on a couple of things. The first is, how are SaaS metrics for seed and Series A financings going to move in 2023? Just looking a little bit earlier. And of course, we have our own thoughts and opinions on this, but we'd love to get your take.
I think broadly valuations are coming down. And so, I don't know, we would sometimes see, pre-product team raise at valuations over 100 million. And I think those rounds are going away a little. I do think, when it comes to the earlier stages, there is a little bit of a zone of indifference where if it is kind of an incredible team and, amazing market opportunity they're going after, and you think it'll be a $5 billion company, in the end, will it matter if you invested at 50 post versus 80 post? Probably not. Yeah. But across the board, I think valuations are coming down because, what everyone's thinking about is, okay, you need to raise the next round and it needs to make sense. And then, often this is actually a question that employees are asking about a lot more, where they think about the 409A, they think about where the business is, and they're thinking about, what does my upside look like from here? Yeah. And so having conversations around equity, what that looks like, and hiring, I feel like that's come into focus when a lot of these teams are trying to hire kind of best in class talent. Yeah. And so I think, being thoughtful about your valuation is also helpful when it comes to running a business. And, that's just one component of it.
Yeah. So you've won the game. Congratulations. As a result, as a result, I mean, you get to open up the bag labeled B next to you, I think over your left shoulder here, or your right shoulder. And so VC unboxing number 2. Excited about what you're going to think about this.
I love Humphrey's phone. Oh, thank you so much. I feel like Bree, I was initially going to be on a post-Thanksgiving diet, but I think that is going to go out the window.
I know, Turkish delights and ice cream. We called it sweet and sassy. We know you love touring ice cream factories or like ice cream parlors. You want to give us a little more on that interesting hobby of yours?
Yeah, I love checking out like the various ice cream shops. So whenever I visit a new city or even in an existing city, if you want to really, get into it on a Saturday afternoon, doing a broad market landscape of the various ice cream shops, I think is some time well spent.
I think
Dang.
that's amazing. Is it only ice cream? How far do you stray? Is it like gelato? Would it be chocolate factories, or is it just ice cream?
Like I tell all my portfolio companies, you got to focus.
Yeah.
I have ventured into gelato too. I
Okay.
would include that in the bucket.
Okay. And out of all of your travels and all of the ice cream shops, do you have a top one, or is it like a top three?
Depends on the occasion. So I was recently in New York, and a friend took me to, I think the spot was called Morgenstern.
Mhm.
Um, and that was definitely up there.
You flew to Cluj, Romania, the day of to close an investment.
That I did.
And that strikes me as something that's like super spontaneous, super kind of like out of bounds of, you know, what normal people would do to close a deal. Like you love something, you go after it, and tell us that story. How did that happen?
We were chasing this company, met them actually later into the process. And when it got approved on Monday, they actually had a couple of term sheets in hand. And so, I wanted to differentiate in the process. And so I actually booked a flight that day to Cluj. And I'd never been to Cluj. And, Bucharest is the main capital city. Cluj, sadly, is if you look it up on Google, and I ended up being there for 2 days. If you look up like things to do in Cluj, like the main Google top suggested box is, while there are no major attractions in Cluj, Romania, lots of beautiful sites. And it's kind of a great university city actually, and so there's a lot of technical talent there. But it was very funny where I arrive in Cluj, Romania, and I'm texting the team asking them, hey, where should I meet you? And they're like, come to the office. And I was like, okay, where's the office? And they're like, no, you can just tell the cab driver the office. And so I literally go to a building and I took a photo in front of it, which had a massive sign in front of it called the office. And it was the main building that a lot of people, especially startup employees, like work in. And it was right next to another building called the Home, which sold like home goods. And I like, that like it, is a place where like they mean what they say.
Yeah.
But luckily, like this story ends well, where they ended up signing the term sheet. We all went to dinner that night. And it's honestly like, one of the co-founders is from Cluj. And so he's just been able to hire incredible technical talent in the area. And it's surprising like how many companies have come out of, Romania, like UiPath being a big one.
Yeah.
But it's great for kind of like the ecosystem, because if you're able to do that, like just the level of technical talent you can get, the discrepancy
Absolutely.
between hiring individuals in Cluj versus maybe like San Francisco Bay Area is also very different. And I actually really think like Eastern and Central Europe has become this, pretty interesting area for startups. And so super, super bullish on that whole region.
Yeah.
That's awesome. When we were doing a lot of our research on you, we saw that you've traveled and spoken in many countries. If you had 3 places you would go back to, what are the top 3?
There's this amazing kind of vacation spot in Turkey that a lot of locals go to called Fethiye. And it's like this local beach destination, which, is incredible. I agree, skiing in Japan, uh, just like the snow, the notion of eating, sushi and ramen while skiing, it's
Oh,
really hard to
yum.
Yeah.
go wrong. Um, and then I think the third spot is I went with my family, but we did kind of this safari trip. Uh,
Oh,
and
rad.
that was also incredible.
I love so I think you and I have had not super similar, but similar in a sense that there's an emphasis on travel and exploration and just cultural exploration, which I think is very underestimated still to this day, even in the global economy that we live in. Um, I think that is something that has opened my eyes on a number of topics, but one of those things is also founder empathy and perspective. And I want you to touch on a little bit of the latter there in terms of the perspective that it provides you, that travel provides you when you're evaluating a company, because I think that's important. Um, and by the way, Brie, she's super modest. I think the reason why some of the traveling that you've been doing is happening is because people want you to come and talk about something that you're very good at, which is PLG. And so can you frame that for us and just talk a little bit about the perspective that that you have and how helpful that is in your job and investing?
Growing up, like we moved around a lot, and candidly, it wasn't something I enjoyed growing up, but now looking back, I have an appreciation for.
Yeah.
But you're constantly meeting different people, forced to make new friends, and a lot of people you meet are very, very different, of very, very different backgrounds. And I think that's been helpful because a lot of the founders we look at are also, very different individuals, very
Mm.
distinct backgrounds. And and I would say this has actually changed quite a bit in the venture landscape, where if you look at, the VC ecosystem, I don't know, even 5 years back, but the philosophy was, if we invest in your company, you need to move to the Bay Area and build your business here. And so a lot of people had to relocate. Or Matrix had a philosophy when I was there where we predominantly invested in entrepreneurs in the Bay Area, Boston, and New York. And the thought was, hey, you want to be close to your portfolio companies, and if someone is not based in one of those regions, you're not going to invest.
Yeah.
And I would say that, and it's further gotten accelerated with COVID, that thinking has totally changed. And
Mm.
so
Mhm.
now, even if I look at my own portfolio and the companies I work with, one of them's in Lithuania, one of them's in Copenhagen, like it's pretty spread out. And you're seeing a lot of entrepreneurs, you don't need to be in Silicon Valley to build an incredible tech business anymore. And it really has expanded quite a bit. And then, one of the things that's great about Lightspeed is we've truly taken a global approach. And so the nice thing is, like, I think it does help you with the ability to go into a new situation, meet a founder, and then find something you both can relate over.
Sure.
Because, like, at the end of the day, this is very much a people business. And
Yeah.
so being able to find, that point of connection, I think goes a really, really long way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So I know in previous interviews, you and many of VCs have said team is one of the number one things that you look for. And I know that you have a superpower of curiosity. So I would love to know how you use that superpower to determine if a team is someone you want to work with.
The biggest thing with a lot of founders is their learning mindset. And there are probably two main ways I've seen that. And so first, we invest in a lot of founders that have no work experience. They graduate, sometimes they don't graduate, they start a company, and I think, and there are a lot of models of really successful founders that have done that. And the
Mm-hmm.
thing they're really distinctive on is they're great at learning. And so maybe they've never done sales, but then they're able to meet a lot of people, distill learnings, and kind of help build out that function. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think the best founders, like one common trait across all of them, is just that learning mindset and their ability to, absorb, synthesize, and then execute in their own way is really, really high. And then the other thing is, we see this with a lot of our companies, but when, what it takes to go from 0 to 5 billion in ARR is very different than what it takes to go from 50 to 100 million in ARR.
Mhm.
And, a CEO's ability to kind of stay curious and scale, and then also learn from their team where they
Mhm.
will have had individuals that have done it before, is critical to go from a founder of a business to eventually like a public CEO.
Yeah.
And so I think that's super, super important in, any founder one works with.
I think Bree and I are both really interested in kind of understanding from you firsthand, um, you know, what your take on product-led growth is. Is it a mentality mindset or is it a structure? How do you approach that? And you know, not to be McKinsey and consulting on you, but how do you preach that and how do you teach that to startups that you work with?
I would think about product-led growth as a business model where someone can sign up and then start paying for your product without having any sales involvement.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the big thing, a lot of founders I want to work with or earlier stage companies, want to be product led, because especially if you're a product and eng founder, it's like, oh, I won't need to think about sales. I
Mm.
focus on product and then, it just sells, which also is not the case. But it is a really, really, really powerful business model because if you looked historically at the growth rates of product-led companies versus pure B2B sales-led companies,
Yeah.
product-led companies have a much higher chance of delivering exponential growth, whereas a B2B sales-led company, you're kind of scaling linearly with the number of salespeople you hire, what is their quota, how much they can bring in, and you grow that way. But I do think product-led growth is not for every company.
Mm.
And so, there are a lot of incredible companies in our portfolio where it is real like B2B selling, and you need a sales rep to explain the business, get a
Yeah.
company implemented, and then start using it. But I think depending on what product you're selling, it can be a very, very powerful business model. And so I would say one of the most notable product-led companies I work with is 1Password,
Mm.
where that
Mm-hmm.
company actually surpassed 100 million in ARR without hiring a single sales commission AE, which is
Wow.
crazy.
Wow.
But honestly, like pretty magical. And so, there are now a number of like iconic product-led companies out there. And it's a fun business model to work on because, users come to your site, they're signing up, like
Yeah.
it sometimes feels a little bit more the way you kind of architect some of your product is maybe more consumer oriented
Sure.
than pure B2B.
Yeah.
And so I think if it makes sense for the company and the business, having a self-serve motion can be very exciting.
Yeah. So correct me if I'm wrong, but all PLG companies are customer focused companies.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would say if you talk to any enterprise company in our portfolio, even if they're PLG or not, they would say they're customer obsessed as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's because, and you mentioned this, by the way, I do want to bring attention to the fact that Anoushka has a fantastic blog and newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
Anoushka, what is the name of the newsletter?
It's the mail.
The Mail. That's okay. It's nondescript, but the what you have in there is fantastic. But I do want to just bring that up because you do post and Lightspeed posts on your behalf as well. You did a piece called "Crucial Startup Lessons for Founders of Product-Led Growth Companies," and I think there's a lot of great lessons to be learned. But my takeaway from this also was that while not all companies are PLG companies, they're customer focused, and that shared kind of passion around listening to the customer is something that I don't know if a lot of companies that exist now that are being built right now that they put enough focus and attention on. Particularly on the earlier stage. What do you think about that?
I think the best CEOs are customer obsessed. And, you know, I think, it's just such a powerful muscle to at the early stages, it's critical to finding product market fit.
Yeah.
And if you are building things that aren't resonating with your users, then there's absolutely no way that company will succeed.
Yeah.
And then the later stages, a lot of my later stage companies are thinking about multi-product, so it's top of mind. And instead of throwing darts at a dartboard to figure out what works, like the best companies I've seen who have executed on multi-product are also really listening to their users to find adjacencies where they know if they launch this offering, 20% of their users will start adopting it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would very much say that's a characteristic that's true for, the best teams we come across.
Yeah.
One thing I've heard you say is delight your customers. What does delight mean to you, and what's a time recently you've been delighted?
Ooh.
We're
not talking Turkish delight.
It's really a delightful experience. I recently actually for my, I'm not a VC isn't the ideal persona for it. But I've been using this tool. It's not a portfolio company. I've been using the sales tool called Apollo. And the intuitiveness of their onboarding process and how they walk me through it just made it kind of totally simple to use. And sometimes I feel like as a VC, you're, I don't know, maybe a highly trained SDR, but a lot of times you're, emailing founders and setting up meetings and, effectively doing outbound sales.
Absolutely.
And so this is a tool designed for outbound sales, but I loved how easy it was to onboard, get integrated into my workflow, start using. And I love when I come across products like that.
I'm sorry, can we get into the sausage making a little bit here? So what was the impetus that made you adopt the service in the first place?
I was looking at the company, and then, for a lot of workflows, you need to pull emails.
Yeah.
And, data on people. And it was recommended as a great source of data.
Yeah.
And so that's what made me start using the business.
That's so cool. That is so cool. And I think there are a couple of takeaways here, but if you were going to talk to a company that's just starting early stage and they're adopting PLG concepts or principles, what is the one that is kind of above all else?
I think in the early stages, it's about iterating until you find pull, and just keep iterating until you find market pull. And then the trickiest thing that founders I work with or talk to deal with is everyone's question is, okay, like what is market pull? Like,
Yeah.
is it like, what is that threshold? And the best description I heard is you'll kind of know it when you feel it, because most of the time, and this was, I think, something that Joe at Loom said, or maybe it was Matt at Clockwise, but one of those founders said, most of the time it's crickets.
Yeah.
And you keep throwing things at a dartboard and, maybe a couple of users sign up, but, you're kind of working through it. And then suddenly when you shift on the product, it'll kind of be this instinctual feeling versus any sort of quantitative metric. But I think if you're building a PLG company, that ability to keep iterating until you find pull is a very, very important skill set. And I think that's a different process than maybe building a true B2B business where you can work with, a subset of design partners, solve a specific problem, and, create a solution to a particular use case. I think this iteration cycle is actually more important for a PLG business.
I do want to ask you a question that's related to the next gift and is on topic with PLG. Who does PLG the best? You've traveled everywhere.
In terms of different companies?
Yeah. Well, no, not in terms of different companies, different countries.
Product-led growth from a country.
Yes. So in terms of mindsets, like who have you seen really adopt PLG mindsets more than others?
I think it's actually interesting. I was talking to a team based out of Australia. This is the
Oh, that's fantastic. So just so everyone understands, she's holding up a box that has the Aura picture frame, and I think the reasoning behind this is that you've traveled everywhere. You clearly take photos of everything. I'm sure you must. And while you might not tweet about them, this is a way of storing them and showcasing them inside of your house.
This is where I'll upload all my avatars,
Oh, God. No avatars. You don't need to see avatars.
You can put your NFTs on there if you want. We have a digital frame for you to be able to show off your avatars, your photos, hopefully all of your wonderful travels. And it is social, so your family can also upload their photos so you can see what they're doing.
Yes.
Oh, cool. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Okay, don't skirt this. Australian company.
I actually think, like I think companies where you're forced to, you can't talk to your customers are actually in some ways like well positioned to do this. And so I'll give you an example. I talked to an incredible PLG team based out of Australia, and one of the big impetuses actually for this team to go pursue the PLG route. And a lot of incredible PLG founders have come out of Australia. The Atlassian team, was founded there. Canva is, a team out of there, and that's a phenomenal business. But I think being based in that region actually is quite interesting, where if you want to sell globally or sell to the US from day one, you being able to staff a whole team that's onboarding customers in the US or responding to customer support queries is actually quite tricky. And so I actually think, companies that are based there or based internationally, like we've seen some really exciting non-US based PLG companies. And I do think like some of those companies have to be PLG just given the geographic and time zone constraints.
Sure. That's actually a very PC PLG commentary. I don't know. I think maybe Anoushka is setting herself up to be the OG of PLG.
Oh, I hope so.
Yeah, I like that.
That would be a high bar.
That'd be kind of cool. That's a better moniker for you.
I'll
I think.
have to change my Twitter. OG of PLG. I
I
already get
love it.
made fun of by my friends enough, if I go this route, there's really no going back.
Well, cheers to you. We are nearing the end of our podcast, and at the end of each of our podcasts, we have iterated ourselves. We've been very PLG in mindset and iterated, and we've come to these amazing 5 questions that we have each of our guests answer. The questions this year are much different in nature than we initially started with, so we're excited about these. But are you ready to play 5 questions with Bree and Vic?
Let's do it.
All right, I'll go first since Vic's choking on his wine. Okay, so if you could do it all over again, would you be an investor or a builder?
I really love my day-to-day job, so I think I would still be an investor.
Fair enough.
Fair enough. I was just so excited about that last question that I decided to choke on my own wine. Excuse me. So our second question for you is, Bree, you should ask this question because I have to recover
Okay.
now.
What movie best fits the future of the human race? Wall-E, which is we've all degenerated into this obese state due to anti-gravity, and metaverse. Avatar, we're dominated by this quest for resources. Elon's going to Mars. Who knows what we're going to need? Or The Matrix, we're all living in a simulation.
Ooh, maybe The Matrix. That would be interesting to see.
I think that's a good answer.
Yeah. Do you entertain ideas like maybe we've all just taken the blue pill and we're all
Depends on the day of the week,
Mondays is leaning more towards the blue pill matrix, and yeah, okay.
That's kind of the vibe. By Friday, I'm like, oh, we're here now.
All right. I think I know where you stand on this. Would you rather spend 1 million on a trip to Earth's outer atmosphere, or outer orbit, or 1 million on a vacation to anywhere on planet Earth? And Ben Narrison, our last guest, said you really have to have a time associated with it. So we're going to give you $1 million for a week. What do you decide?
I think I would do planet Earth. I don't know how many sites there are to see in the outer orbit, but I might be selling it short. I might be selling the itinerary short.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Bree, what's our last question?
Our last question is, what is the one deal you passed on that you wish you hadn't?
One company that I think was a phenomenal company, and this is also in the contact center space, but we'd looked at TalkDesk, and we looked at a pretty high priced round there. And so I think there are a lot of questions around, and this was like quite a high priced round, and there are a lot of questions around how do you think about, overall market opportunity, and is the market large enough to support this kind of evaluation? But it's kind of a phenomenal company. It operates in a phenomenal space. And I think they've been incredible at creating like a cloud first contact center business. And so I definitely wish we had invested in that company. But yeah, there's actually, I maintain a long list of companies that, one wishes they had done. And honestly, like, we're wrong all the time. And so it's fun to see some companies, especially, seed and Series A companies I met at Matrix many, many years ago, because now, some of those companies are public, or I meet them now at the growth stage. And that's quite fun to see just the evolution of the team, the evolution of the product, and what's happened.
Do you stay in touch with those founders from the Matrix days even?
I try to, you know, I definitely try to. Like, I think, you know, obviously there's a way to even be better at it, where, you know, in our day to day, you're meeting so many people. And I think some people are exceptional at doing that. But I do think a big part of this is, you know, maybe there are a bunch of companies where we didn't invest, but they could be interesting partners. They could maybe be acquisition candidates for a larger company. They could now be advisors to some of the earlier stage founders that I work with. It really like kind of all goes around. And so I think just like ending on, you know, just ensuring that all interactions are on good terms. And even if you don't invest in a company, you know, there's a good chance that founding team will go off and do something pretty exceptional,
Yeah.
is important.
I honestly cannot think of a late stage growth investor, particularly on the enterprise and SaaS PLG front, that I would rather put a company in front of than you, Anoushka.
Heard it here first, you know?
No, it's refreshing to have the kind of transparency and the clarity that you gave us, and we're just very grateful that you would be on. And as a token of our thanks, we'd like for you to open up the last gift, if you might. I don't know about you, Bree, but my wine bottle did not stand a chance tonight.
Wow, you were really enjoying yourself.
Man, I just want to tell the listeners out there that this is a very enjoyable podcast to make, not because of the alcohol, but because you get to meet some of the best people with varied backgrounds. What do you think, Anoushka?
I
What
love
is
it.
that?
I wear a fleece all the time.
You
So
wear a fleece all the time.
I know I feel like I run quite cold, so I'm always bundled up in the office.
There you go. Naysayers be damned. Anoushka runs in a fleece, and we're excited. So we got her a fleece. As if you're a listener to the podcast, we do every episode, but we're very very excited to have had you on the show. And as we always do, we close out the episode with a cheers from our guest, and it's your time to shine a light on just about anything in your life, in your work, a portfolio company, whatever it might be. This is your 20 seconds to give us a cheers out.
No, I mean, cheers to everyone for closing kind of 2022. I feel like it's been quite the year. And so, you know, here's to kind of a wonderful, hopefully, couple of weeks for folks to relax, recharge, and then come back to a nice COVID-free 2023.
Yes.
And really, really appreciate you both having me on the show. I know all of the gifts, they were super, super thoughtful. And just really enjoyed this evening with both of you.
Yay.
All
Cheers
four
to
of
you.
actually.
Cheers.
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 Catch full episodes of Drinks with a VC on Spotify, Apple, or Google Podcasts, and on YouTube for video. Be sure to subscribe for the latest episode drops.